Hello, I'm Lucas Feltzman and I would like to welcome you to Studio Visit, a new series of talks hosted by the Bill Lane Center for the American West at Stanford University. If you are not familiar with the Bill Lane Center for the American West, you can find information about them at their website. Please go visit it. It's west.stanford.edu. It's a wonderful organization that engages scholars, artists, professors, students, researchers who are concerned about the American West and conduct research, organize talks, and events in regards to the West. So Studio Visit is a new series of talks, and it lets us, the audience, me and you, visit a maker, an artist, a writer, somewhere in the West, and go to their place of working, if that is a studio or if it's in the field, wherever they conduct work, and see some of their work, observe a talk, and then also ask some questions. And I'm really pleased that today I can start the series of talks with Arthur Tress.
Okay.
Hello, Arthur.
Hello.
Arthur was born in Brooklyn in the 40s, and I mean, that's 1940, not 2040, even though if you look at his work, it might seem like he has come back to us from the future. He grew up in Brooklyn, and his early photographic career took place in New York. He worked there until 1993, when he moved to Cambria, a small coastal town in California, and now he lives in San Francisco, which is where we are right now. Arthur's work has been shown in many institutions and museums. I will not go through all of them, of course. I just want to mention a few: the LA County Museum, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Whitney Museum, the Art Institute of Chicago. Most recently at a cluster of new museums called Platform 10 in Lausanne, Switzerland. And also later this year there will be what looks like it's going to be a wonderful show at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, which will also include a new monograph. Now, I met Arthur Tress in the early 80s in New York. I had just come, I want to say off the boat, but it was off the plane from Switzerland. I was a young man in my 20s on the way to San Francisco to study art at the San Francisco Art Institute. And I wanted to stop over in New York because I knew it would kind of blow my mind coming from a small town in Europe. And I went to a gallery to look at some work and somehow met Arthur Tress, who almost immediately asked me if he could photograph me. And I was a little shy and my English was shaky, more shaky than now. And I said no, because honestly, I was a little afraid. So now, 40 years later, I'm really pleased to host Arthur for this talk. And looking over his work, I think that maybe my initial reaction wasn't so off, because I think we should be a little bit afraid of him, because Arthur is an artistic disruptor. He is a jester that will play with your perception of the photographic plane, where things are not what they really appear. He will prod your secret fears and passions, and with a little twinkle in his eye, connect you to your unconscious. Another thing that I became aware of in the last couple of days as I was spending a little time here in this place with Arthur is how much work he produces, he has produced and still produces. I almost want to say, like, photography is his daily bread. This man is unstoppable. Every day, up to this day, he will go out and make photographs. And all these photographs create, of course, a gigantic archive. And I want to mention also that part of this archive has been acquired by special collections at Stanford University, and maybe more of this archive will also go to the university. And the rest of it right now is here in this place. And so I thought maybe to start, we could walk to your archive and take a quick little look, if that's okay.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Okay. And so this looks like, it almost looks like a server a little bit, because things are stacked, but you can touch everything.
Yes. Well, I've always believed in analog photography, and so I do my own darkroom work, and I used to develop the film and make prints and contact sheets and negatives. But even in those days, one had to have a kind of a filing system. And so I organized the negatives by date and year, and then the contact sheets, which are very important, also from these periods. So I can, if I need something from 1979, I can go to this box and then find the negatives and make a print.
Can you pull something out?
Yeah. Okay. This is contacts from last year, 2 years ago, 4/21/2021, and okay, and
Pick one out, maybe.
yeah. Strangely enough, I've been photographing. I swim 3 times a week at the San Mateo Community College. I usually finish about 1 o'clock. I spend the rest of the afternoon exploring with my camera Silicon Valley and San Mateo, which is amazingly fascinating. But in Foster City, which was set out as mostly in the 1960s as a kind of utopian village with some of the world's, they had planned to have Le Corbusier build homes and apartment houses in Foster City. It never worked out, but it's still a very interesting place. They're building a seawall, and next to these gigantic corporate campuses, all with views of the bay, but of course they're below the floodplain. So I think they realize that maybe in a couple of years they're going to be flooded out if there's any storms or sea level rise. So they're spending billions of dollars building a seawall over here just to stop that from happening.
Can you tell maybe the audience what a contact sheet is?
Oh, yes. Well, the contact sheet is one roll of film. I use a Hasselblad camera that takes 12 photographs on a roll. And so you take the negatives and you press them against a sheet of enlarging paper, silver gelatin paper, and expose it to light for like 5 seconds, and then you develop it and you get a contact sheet, and that becomes your guide and reference.
Great. So I'd like to mention there's also a second room that we're not going to, that is just as big and contains prints and other parts of the archive. But in here, this is really all these boxes are just filled with negatives and contact sheets.
Yes.
So maybe let's go back and start looking.
Okay.
It's interesting that you ended up pulling out something that had to do with the environment, because we're going to start looking at some images from your early work, which was also about the environment.
Okay.
So we start out with this image that is
Oh, yes.
a little scan from one of your notebooks, and it talks about this idea of walking, of a walkabout, which
Of a
is
walkabout.
Aborigines
Phrase.
space to be in. Can you tell us a little bit how that
Well,
relates to you?
Number one, I always keep throughout the years, that's from a notebook from around 1990. This is my most recent notebook from 2020. And actually, on the cover, I put a constructivist design, very dynamic. And I'm kind of making my new photography much in this kind of Bauhaus constructivist abstract style. The idea of a walkabout, my earliest photography in the 70s, I became a kind of amateur, self-described ethnographer, and I began doing tribal people around the world. I really got very interested in their world views and how they saw things. And so I think that I sort of put myself, when I go out photographing, into a kind of a dream time, which was the Aboriginal word for this walkabout, where a young man would go out and kind of wander over the land for months at a time. And so I kind of get a kind of zone feeling. You know, my head gets put into a different place, and I see the world from kind of a different odd perspective.
Yes. I see an atlas there on your desk, on your pile there. Do you need a map for a walkabout?
Well, my earliest work, which I think you're showing on the screen now, was called San Francisco 1964.
Okay.
I was 24 years old, and I spent the summer in San Francisco visiting my sister, and I was sort of very interested in finding the kind of tribal remnants in our own contemporary lives and symbols. And so I kind of wandered around San Francisco, which was going through a change. It was going to happen. The summer of love was going to arrive in about 3 years. Then I returned to New York in 1968, and I thought New York city was really in bad shape environmentally. And I was one of the first photographers during that time to try to use my photography to develop an environmental awareness. And the Sierra Club had just opened up a gallery in Manhattan to sort of become aware of the urban spaces. And so I proposed an exhibit to them about places you could make parks and recreational areas in underused parts of New York City. So I would use this atlas and just kind of find interesting areas of New York City to go and photograph. This is a photograph now as a family picnicking on the Bronx River, or this is a family in Sheepshead Bay. And, you know, it's, and I wanted to show the kind of the stresses of city life and how it affected people environmentally.
Yes. And the Sierra Club was trying to reach out, kind of not just be tied to the idea of Yosemite, but into the urban spaces as well.
And then I got a commission from the New York State Council on the Arts to do a portfolio that was given out for free to New York City schools. They made 5,000 of these boxes. and it contained a sort of built-in exhibit.
Wonderful. In a non-precious way, so the
Yes.
students could actually pin them up
Yes.
maybe, or draw on them, or do something with them.
So as I was doing this project, my photographs became kind of more dreamlike and surreal. Perhaps because that was a way of expressing the strangeness of the urban environment that I felt, the alienation, anxiety. So even though these were just environmental photographs, they began taking on another persona.
So that, in a way, led you to your next body of work. How does that work? Is it a fluid transition, or is there a concept that starts something new?
Around 1968, there was kind of a revolution in the idea of progressive education. It was called the open classroom, where teachers and young students work together to be more creative rather than having the usual. And so there was a friend of mine who was doing dream workshops in New York City public schools. And I just thought that would make a great theme. He was working with children to get them to express their dreams in paintings and writings and poetry. And I thought, well, that would make a great idea for a book of my own. So I had access to these schools. I did workshops with some children, but I also asked friends what dreams they remembered from their childhood and my own dreams. And I read books about dreams, the dreams of tribal people. And I was using a Hasselblad with a wide-angle lens. I'll show you that camera now. It's kind of a very simple, old-fashioned camera that you put film in and you look through. But it takes wonderful, very clear, simple photos. And to do the children's dreams, and some adult ones also, I had to what I sort of invented or began doing staged photography. That means you kind of manipulate the scene beyond what you would just normally found there.
Right.
And so in this one, I had the boy put his hand between the seats of this old Staten Island railroad car seat.
But we might want to mention that all the photographs you will see in this slideshow, or all of your work, has happened in actuality. There's no double exposing, there's no...
Yes, darkroom work.
It's all
Just
real,
Yes.
even though we call it surreal. Can you talk a little bit about your dislike of the word surrealism?
No, surrealism means just a little bit transforming reality, the reality that's a little bit beyond the normal things that we see. So, I mean, it's a little overused now. But at the time I was doing these photos almost a half century ago, the main thrust of photography was just photojournalism, street photography. But these photographs struck a different kind of note. And this one, called Flood Dream, the boy is just standing underneath a roof on a pier with an abandoned ferry boat. And it's become very iconic. It almost could be something now for climate change and disaster. Yes. And
so the meaning of the photograph shifts as time changes?
Yes.
I thought they were the truth.
No, I try to build in a certain ambivalence to the photos, but also I come from the generation, and even my parents, of trying to have a certain idea of political and social comment in the photos against war, poverty, working to make the world a better place. So this is a photo, and it's still something I think about when I'm photographing in Silicon Valley. But also, the early photographs dealt with my sense of mortality away. This is my father. I still have that chair, and as I've gotten older, I've photographed myself as a self-portrait in that same chair, because I'm replacing my father in a certain way.
What kind of a childhood did you have growing up?
I think about that, you know, you have to realize 1940s Brooklyn was not really the suburbs. It was kind of a tough neighborhood, and I was kind of I was perky but kind of fragile child, and I kind of liked hanging out by myself and playing with puppets and things like that. You know, I lived in my own world of fantasy. And
so now we're transitioning into another body of work.
yes. I thought to do a series based on one of, when you study tribal people, a very important part of their religious ceremonies are kind of rites of passage, and young men often go on vision quests. So I thought I would try to illustrate a vision quest, but just using my own shadow. And it became a book called Shadow. It's 100 photographs of my own shadow. And in the dark room, I kind of made a little glow around myself. Very simple techniques. But again, nothing really had been done like this before. It's called a novel in photographs. And I did them all over the world. I did them in France and in Latin America. So it was a very groundbreaking series. But again, just using the simple camera thing. And I always say that I want to celebrate the imagination rather than technical things.
You lost your head.
I lost my head.
How about this? You called it a novel in photographs.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about bookmaking, because it seems to be an important part of your work, and there's piles of books. I don't know, do you know how many books you have published at this point, or roughly, or?
Well, about 30, I think.
Okay.
But several of them are self-published.
Okay.
And also I have a little library at blurb.com where people can see. I make little books sometimes like this. But yes, that's myself holding up a roll of negatives, which in shadow become reversed. They become positive. And so...
since you were just showing us the camera a minute ago, I wanted to ask about
yes.
the different cameras. Not that we're gearheads and only talk about the cameras, but the camera is important in that each camera and lens produces a different pictures, but more so it even changes the approach of the photographer, even what you might photograph and how you might photograph. Now the Hasselblad, which has a mirror, so you actually see the image, you're looking through the lens, from all the medium format cameras, I would think is the most analytical camera. Or what do you think of that? Or why is the Hasselblad the one that you chose to work with?
Mostly I still work with it now. People say, why don't I do digital photography? It's just something I'm used to. It has a kind of authority to me. I love to hear that click in the mirror popping up. And I have to be very careful with the kind of abstract design of the photo, where if you have a 35 millimeter camera, it's kind of quick, snap. But the Hasselblad, you get to make a more studied composition. And if you're using a larger camera, like a 4x5, the Hasselblad is still very mobile. You can move it around. And
Yes.
So it just sort of fitted my personality. This is a contact sheet. So you can, from the Shadow series, and you can see myself and sort of acting out all, it was kind of like a dance with the camera. And I'm always holding the camera. You don't see it, but I'm holding it to one side. Well, okay, fast forward. Around 2000, I moved to California around 1993. I wanted to be closer to nature. Mm-hmm. I had done a lot of Zen studies in Japan in the 1960s, 1965, and studied Japanese flower arrangement and design. And living in New York had gotten crowded and busy and smoggy. It was awful. So I just found this little town that was near Hearst Castle. It was inexpensive to live there. And I just wanted to be closer to nature. But there was kind of a limited amount of subject matter in this little area. But one day I just went to Cayucas, which is a few miles from here. I said, what is that? It was a skate park. And I thought it was these amazing sculptural shapes and these kids flying by and shadows and the beautiful texture of the wood shapes or concrete shapes. So I just originally intended to do a project on skate park design, which was just around that time becoming revolutionized. There were designers who were doing amazing sculptures, almost like Frank Gehry buildings, mm-hmm. with bowls and curves and dips. So, and they were sprouting all over California, and every suburban subdivision had to have their skate park. And I visited about 100 of them. Looked them up on the internet, and I drive. And so it became a book. Also, I began experimenting called Skate Park, where but towards the end, I began spinning the camera as the skaters went by. And so part of the way I work is, over the years, I don't like to repeat myself. Mm-hmm. So I had never done, you might call this extreme sport photography. I'd never done sport photography. I'd never had done photography where people were moving, at 30 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. So I did this when I was 65 years old. So I'm down there with these flying skateboards. And coming to California, it has amazing light. Mm-hmm. It's desert light no matter where you are. And it just kind of penetrates the forms. And I also photographed over months the development of the skate parks, how they were built. And the skate parks, this is the way the curves blend into the old oak tree. Mm-hmm. Its relationship. I'm a big fan of Frank Lloyd Wright. And I photographed Hannah House at Stanford, and with Paul Turner. And again, here's that spinning technique. Mm-hmm. To show my real entrance to California, I made a skateboard sculpture. It's called Sketchina. It's about 12 feet high. It was shown at the San Luis Obispo Art Museum. And then when I was at a skate park, I saw a sign that said paintball, and I said, well, what's that? This is in Petaluma. And I said, these are amazing too. This is sort of the opposite of skate parks. This is kind of earthbound and dark, and the people who go there are just kind of a little militaristic. And so again, I got lists of where all the paintball places are, and I drove to them, and I love maps. I don't have GPS, and they're usually on the fringes of suburban areas, unused land. They build these huge paintball parks, a little bit like Mad Max towns. And the kids get very involved in it, and they kind of have this adrenal rushes, and they get a little, these are two, I think these two soldiers who have kind of come back to re-experience the war experience. And so it was very interesting to, again, it's the kind of tribal rite of passage that we don't offer young people anymore, that they rediscover for themselves. And it's a little frightening. This little kid didn't want to be there. And but it's a whole culture that's a little under the radar.
Well, since you mentioned rite of passage and also Buddhism a little earlier, yes. Can you talk a little bit about your interest and relationship to Buddhism? Well,
not so much in these photos. These I would say more are social comment.
Yes.
And obviously, anyone who knows the Dalai Lama and all that, it's really a religion of peace and not war. And so I suppose Iraq, Beirut, Germany, these were all sections of a paintball facility in Southern California.
Well, I thought what was interesting was that
yes.
that you have that sense of peace and Buddhism, and
yes.
Yet you can also photograph war. So it seems that in Buddhism there's this sense of embracing everything, life and death,
sure.
violence and peace, and maybe that sense let you do work like
yes.
this as well.
But to go back, one of the reasons, again, I had moved to Cambria was to be closer to nature. And I was there for almost 30 years. And sort of midway, a herd of elephant seals moved from Año Nuevo, which is near Santa Cruz. They moved into Cambria. You know, they found a deserted beach. They started at 400, and now they're about 10,000. And now they're protected. You really can't go and photograph them. But when they first arrived, and they're usually just sleeping on the beach, so you don't really disturb them. So I began photographing the elephant seals. And then I would sit there for hours studying their society. You know, you could see the rivalries and the females and the babies. It was a whole structure set up on the beach, and it would evolve over the seasons, they disappear. And I saw how similar it was, even physically, to human beings. And I made a little book called Colony, which compares human beings to elephant seals. There's even our spines are very much like elephant seals' bodies in some ways. And our hands, you see, they have 5 little fingers, and those are their toes. They evolved from the same kind of mammal as we did. Okay, well, again, around 2000, I said, you know, what do I do for an encore? And I said, well, let's just go back to like when you were in high school, when you were just starting out as a photographer, and go back just to very simple pictures, you know, just walking around like you were a teenager again, and see what happens in 20 years. So I just flipped the lens shade of my Hasselblad over, and it made this round shape that I could hold, and it made this kind of irregular circle. And in Zen Buddhism, you have ensos, which are those wonderful circles, usually indicating nothingness. But like this is the bottom of a charcoal broiler, just to photograph the most simple things and see how they would be transformed by the vision of the camera.
Yes. And also, a little later, we see that you change the shape of your images again to the diamond. We will get to that in a minute, but it looks like you stuck to the same format, but you pushed that format in different directions.
I've just given myself the freedom just to... So someone actually made a book called Planets, beautifully printed in Belgium. But again, these are just, breadcrumbs. And yet, I've had exhibits of them at the National Academy of Science in Washington, blown up. And they do look like planets. It's kind of a joke, but... and again, that's kind of a Zen sensibility, where things are, the simplest things are transformed. But there's a kind of a sense of humor about them. That's just some paint on a lid, and...
How about humor? There's a lot of that in your photography.
Yes, I think so. Okay.
Is humor something that just has to come in naturally? It seems difficult, something that you can construct.
No, I think you can do visual punning. And I think it's always been part of photography, Cartier-Bresson and everyone, where there's a nun walking down a street in front of a movie poster. There's kind of that humorous of unusual juxtapositions. So, but I just do it with little funny translations, transpositions, things against each other, but even shapes bleeding and intertwining with each other. Now, can we go back a little bit? I want to show the notebook. This is a notebook from around 2010, where I'd been living there for 15 years, and every day almost I would drive past Morro Rock, which is a little volcanic island in Morro Bay. And just one day I saw it and took out the camera and I took a photo of it. And it's sort of, I said, well, how do I fit Morro Rock into my square format? And I said, well, I'll just make it into a pyramid. And, go back one, excuse me. And Hokusai did his famous 100 views of Mount Fuji, and so I know that work. And there's an exhibit right now at the Museum of Art in Boston that have 4 of my Morro Rock photos in conjunction with an exhibit of Hokusai. So I'm just amazed that that's happening. But again, those my friends' hands. But again, I had never pushing myself into areas I had never done before. Like I'd never done landscape photography or, bird photography. And so again, the diamond shape transforms the way it cuts off objects and expands it horizontally and vertically, almost like a Japanese scroll. You can see it this way or vertically. And in Japanese garden design, you do something called the borrowed landscape. So this is how those stones reflect the distant Morro Rock.
It's a very unusual shape for us to look at in photography. Yes. And what it reminds me, of course, is that every picture that a camera throws, a lens produces, is round.
Yes.
And it's just that we're so square, we put a square around it.
Yes. And again, this kind of looks like, but this is a beautiful photograph. The young girl's hair, just coming down the shape it reflects of Morro Rock. And I did 10,000 of them.
That's crazy.
But it's one of them. This is a funny photograph. The dog is being lifted off a fishing boat in a special little thing. And they have Morro Bay, summer festival, and they have one of these things where kids get into these plastic bubbles, and that kind of relates to my dream collector photos. So even though I'm trying to open up new areas for myself, I often come back to the same themes.
Yes.
But here you have the shape of the seal and the shape of Morro rock, a little bit like Hokusai. And yes.
Well, just that this idea of collecting is something that seems to come up again
yes.
too. You are a passionate collector of things, of photographs, of Japanese books, of...
Yes.
What else do you collect?
Flea market things. God, I'm trying to resist. But again, that beautiful sense. And a lot of people have photographed Morro rock, but for sure.
Well, I think you definitely...
So I'm hoping, but this is wonderful, just the accidental, the way the two bats of the boys almost lead into the shape of Morro rock. I mean, it's just, there are these miraculous coincidences that are almost quantum in a certain way.
Yes. But it's not only coincidence, because you are there too. You are part of the equation.
It's being into that zone. Mm-hmm. There was a minor white Alfred Stieglitz. They called it equivalence. Mm-hmm. And so here you have this little boy making, as we all did as children, making those little sand sculptures. But one of them has collapsed. And it's the same shape of Morro rock, 3 miles away. And it's not a posed picture. It just... putting yourself into the flow and being aware at kind of a very heightened state of the relationships of things. And also, it changed during the season. It's California, but we do have those long, cold, wet winters. So the shape of the surfer's arms. And so you might say the training that I got doing skate parks and paintball enable me now to work very quickly, capture a bird, but it's also the little bit in the corner, the shape of the driftwood sort of picks up the theme. And this is just that idea of, this is a very Buddhist kind of photograph, the double reflection of the people within the rock. But it's also a little bit, okay, so I moved to San Francisco in 2015, and I began exploring the city. Just, a lot of photographers have a love affair with San Francisco. It's wonderfully visual cities, but I began seeing that they had this wonderful ferry boat system. And so I would take ferries around the Embarcadero, and then ended up at Mare Island. And I said, what is this place? And it's changed quite a bit. It already had been. It was a place where they had made nuclear submarines during World War II up to the 1950s. And there were a lot of old buildings. They were building a new submarine monument. And you could just walk around for hours and there would be no people there. It's being made into something like the Presidio now, but I just got it at that cusp of transformation. So I spent a year on Mare Island. And again, this kind of precisionist photography there was something kind of called precisionist American painting and photography, Charles Sheeler, different photographers photographed those kind of buildings. But they had this wonderful eagle and this kind of snow white glass coffin. Very strange place. And it's going to be developed into suburban housing, unfortunately. But the Vallejo Police Department was throwing this out. And, okay, so we're up to 2020, and the ferry boats have closed down. And I said, well, and I thought, well, why not photograph all the closed schools? Because I had passed schools, but there were all these signs, no trespassing, contact the main office and all this. I said, well, who's going to do that? They're not going to let me. But then hundreds of schools were now closed. There was nobody there.
Because of the pandemic.
Because of the pandemic.
Right.
And you could just kind of walk in or walk around them. And they were all a little kind of going to seed, broken things, overgrown gardens. And it became a little project called In Recess, Schools, Closed Schools of Northern California. And again, I went from schools from Petaluma to Santa Cruz. And it was kind of again, using my maps, looking where these places were. And relates a little bit to the dream collector photos, that thing about desolate childhood and the emptiness of things, because they had a very quiet, strange quality to them. And, but again, I began thinking of myself as an architectural photographer. So again, every few years I try to reinvent myself. And so this is a wonderful one. This is Pismo Beach Junior High School. You've survived the strangest year ever, with the custodian kind of looking at me strangely. Who is this guy? And and that led into my new series. Oh, and of course, we all know now the great mental health problems that the kids had from that. So there's a lot of levels of this going on in this series of photos. And of course it was co-current with the Black Lives Matter. That's Pacifica. That's Daly City.
Dream.
Yes, all the school signs still kept flashing on, even though the schools were closed. It was a little bit like after, and these are all around San Mateo. I visited more than 125 schools. Well, this is a wonderful one. You know, I ran out of elementary schools and high schools. I said, well, community colleges are closed. And this is City College, which has always been a little run down and underfunded. But it was totally deserted, and it was done by a famous brutalist architect. A lot of the architects of the Bay Area were famous architects who did these schools. They're mostly forgotten. So I think Paul Rudolph did this school. But just this strange juxtaposition of the radar antenna, the stripes of the fence, the kind of little bonsai, strange little concrete things. It becomes a very kind of strange moment. And I designed it. I became very good with the diamond shape. Your eye is pulled into the picture, and then you can go left or right, or, you know, and it's an amazing, you know, I don't know how to do it. It's an amazing, but it has a certain kind of almost surreal mood, even though it's something you could just walk by any day, I think. Next. And of course, unfortunately, this is the Thurgood Marshall Junior High School. And the schools, even in affluent, progressive San Francisco, the schools for minority neighborhoods are really run down and not in good condition. It kind of surprised me. But, and this is City College. Again, you know, temporary classrooms, some benches, but it has there was an Italian painter who kind of invented surrealism. His name is decaying, and he influenced everyone. And so it has that kind of decaying feeling of silence and emptiness. And even though it seems a very quiet scene, I try to build in a quality of unease, visual unease, you know, with movement of things. So that's what I like about the Hasselblad. You can be very intentional sometimes, even though quick with it, but okay. Then I went to photograph one day, San Mateo Community College, who was done by an important architect, John Warnke, who was later the boyfriend of Jacqueline Kennedy. So I just, after I swim, I began exploring the surrounds. This San Mateo has wonderful old mansions and kind of interesting country clubs, as well as his historic buildings. And that's San Mateo Community College Library. It was built in the 60s. It's a masterpiece. And again, trying to use this kind of Bauhaus juxtaposition of light and shade that brings you into the picture. Okay. Then I begin bringing props. This is a funny series. In front of all the corporate campuses, they have these really bad, ugly sculptures, you know, that I don't know who picks them out, but so I thought I'd do my own series of corporate sculptures. So I bring props. I made this one out of focus. This is the new Google by the Bay buildings. They're like 5 buildings, probably cost $1 billion each to make one building. They're empty. There's nobody there. So there are all kinds of social issues happening right now in Silicon Valley. I mean, there's a worker. This is Hillsdale Community Center, shopping center. And I make the people really small. This was once a fabulous 1950s motel, the Hillsdale Motel. It's very famous in books about 50s architecture. It's just been sold. They're going to put a corporate campus there, but you can still go look at it. This is Oracle. And you can walk around these places. Sometimes it takes about a half an hour for the security guard to find me, sort of say, "Who are you?" But most of the time, I get away with it. I use these different guidebooks.
Can you talk a little bit about the fact that you're not using navigation and how about getting lost is important for you?
So I use these books, but what's interesting about using maps and books is that you have to. I try to remember it. Left turn here at El Camino, right turn at Holly Drive, but then I make the wrong turn, and then I find myself, somewhere else, and like this, and so it's very interesting, that element of chance. And then this is a garbage disposal at the new Palo Alto Medical Center. Millions of dollars invested in these places. They don't really want you there. They sort of make it like a park, oh come, but then they have these signs, no public access. So they're very ambivalent. They really just want it for their little group of people. Mm-hmm. But there's a law in Palo Alto that all the corporate campuses have to be open to the public, which is kind of interesting. This is the new Meta Center. I love parking garages, and I'm viewing it. Although I really just want to do abstract, kind of Bauhaus perfect photographs, you become aware of the social issues. Mm-hmm. Like one of the big social issues, I read the daily newspaper. So, and then there have all these little towns, yes, like this, like Millbrae, Burlington, Belmont. they need the tax revenue. So if you propose a 3 million foot building in the middle of the town, they'll say, great, we love you. So they keep on approving all these giant office complexes. And so they're tearing down the older business parks, those little 2-story business parks that you used to see. So this is a broken lamp fixture. And it looked like, it really fell, it just sort of fell into the bushes, and it looked like an eye or an egg. And you can see the newer building in the background that's going to replace. But 2 things that are happening. We all lived through the recession of 2008, which was a real estate collapse with the banks. So we just saw the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, and there'll be more, the Republic Bank, because all these banks gave loans at cheap rates to the construction companies. And so they're building these buildings, but there are no workers, these buildings are 3/4 empty. It's happening in San Francisco. So you can just see this disaster happening. And so there's no planning. So even though I just want to take these interesting photos, here's one, it's all biotech, and it's all life science labs, like the people who gave us COVID. They also gave us the vaccination for COVID.
And so this picture also looks like a gigantic eyeball.
Yes.
Which leads us a little bit back to this sense of you as the seer and the seeker.
Well, I just noticed in this photo that my silhouette is half bright moon and half dark moon.
Yes.
And that's my most energetic time of the month. I just look up when the moon is half and half. And I think that's like my personality, is that you can see lighthearted themes in my work, sun-drenched themes, but also the darker side of things. So I sort of skirt those 2 issues, almost like a Picasso face in this photo. So, okay.
Yes, thank you very much. So let's go to some questions.
Okay.
Kevin Tracy says, hi Arthur,
That's my friend.
Glad to join. Okay, Kate Gibson has a question.
I thought that was a great talk. Thank you, Arthur. And I particularly loved the Cambria section because I have a family history there, lots of family in Cambria and Cayugas. And so I was wondering if kind of 2 questions. One is, as you've kind of moved along your journey from New York to Cambria to the Bay Area, do you find that the places that you used to live stay with you and influence your work now? And are there any locations that you haven't been to yet that are on your wish list?
Okay. Well, I think I was, even though when I came to California, like everyone thinks, well, you're going to be a new person when you get to California.
Didn't happen?
It didn't. Well, I'm just sort of noticing that I've come back to many of the same themes, the themes of disastrous urban planning, inequality, economic inequality. I'm still photographing very much this kind of in the style of magic realism. It's very real, but then there's a kind of strange mood or perspective to it that's unsettling. Mm-hmm. And so I've sort of really been myself, but the themes are just expressed in different ways as time has gone by. And it is kind of true, you don't really change. So, no, it's always a kind of surprise where I'm going to end up next. Just like I spent 6 months taking the ferries around the Bay Area. And what I photographed, and I thought it was a beautiful series, but I don't think anybody else did. 2 things. One was the schmutz that accumulated, the dirt and the sea spray that accumulated on the windows of the ferry. And I don't think anybody's ever noticed it. And the light would kind of shine through in a kind of granular way. And then you could see Oakland or San Francisco in the background, or the bridge, sort of as silhouettes. I'm sorry we didn't include any in the show. But again, things can be very surprising. You're just sitting there and you're saying, well, that's amazing, right? Yes. And so, but...
what is your regiment of photographing now? How much do you photograph, or how do you?
Well, I'm an old guy now, and probably I don't have too many new ideas that are going to revolutionize the history of photography, but I do go out. When I was in San Luis Obispo, I took Tai Chi 3 times a week. And you do it, and it kind of keeps your blood circulating, and you kind of get into it and all that. And so now, when you do a flower arrangement, there's certain, it's called the way, the way of flower arrangement, the way of garden design. And you do it as a kind of self-realization. So I go out and I photograph, but I say 5 rolls a day keep dementia away. No, it's true. Yes. I mean, it really keeps me, and I don't really care if anybody sees the photos, but I'm just sort of just doing it to keep my mind and body active, even though some of them are really extraordinary photos. But I've gotten known for my early work. The show at the Getty will be my photographs from the 1970s. So you're kind of haunted by this earlier body of work. And that's my little footnote in photo history. Not my pictures of elephant seals on the beach in front of Hearst Castle, unfortunately. Yes.
Here is another question from Felicity. Do the subjects of your photos ever object to having their pictures taken, particularly the skateboarders?
No, but it's funny. Both the skateboarder and paintball kids, they're photographing each other a lot now, and so photography is part of that culture, and also, I use this big, it's not like I'm sneaking up on people. It takes about 5 minutes to do. Okay. So people are very aware of me taking the photos. Yeah. So, and also as a photographer, I've learned to sort of make myself a little bit invisible, quiet, invisible. So people, I'm just there. And it was even true when I photographed in New York City back in the 1960s. That so it's a sort of a technique that most photographers learn, and so almost all the time people allow me to take their photographs or hang out in their group.
Here's another question.
Yes.
It's great to see this amazing legacy of work from so many years. A question about Morro rock. Did you refer to a specific Hokusai image for inspiration?
Well, he did. Hokusai did a set of 36 woodcuts called 36 Views of Mount Fuji. And then he did another set of just black and white book illustrations called 100 Views of Mount Fuji. And I did look at those prints, etc. So it really was the whole series. And you can see 100 views of Mount Fuji online. It's been digitalized. It's very easy to find. It was. What's interesting is Hokusai and myself were both the same age when we did it. And in both instances, Hokusai changed his name. You know, when you reach certain birthdays in Japan, you can change your name, artist, and also artists did it frequently. So it's sort of a rite of passage into being. So I always feel that my Mount Fuji, my Mount Morro rock photos are kind of a philosophical feeling about man's place in the cosmos. So you see people are very small in the Morro rock photos as part of nature, which was one of Hokusai's great themes also. Yes. But I want to make a footnote. My archive recently gave 800 silver prints of Morro rock to the Special Collections Library. And I'm hoping that we'll make a book of it someday. Okay. Soon.
Maybe I have a last question for you, since this will be recorded. Do you have any messages for the future?
Oh. Well, that's a little. Well, I think there are a lot of younger photographers, and I like being sort of an example, a mentor for, you know, that one sustains a kind of personal vision over a long period of years, and that one is open to all kinds of new things, etc. And so that could be my legacy to the future. If that makes any sense.
Your work and the way you go about making art.
Yes, and so I think it's both being an example of the creative process, which is something I'm aware of, but also wanting to share that in a kind of a modest way with other people. And they're on Vimeo and YouTube. There are kind of videos of me giving talks and lectures and slideshows. And sometimes I get emails from photographers and younger photographers that they've been inspired by the work. So I think that's really what you pass on.
Yes. Well, your work is very, very inspiring, and I would like to thank you very much for letting us visit you. Here's our friend coming to say hello too. Thank you, Arthur Tress, for hosting us at your studio, and thank you for participating.
All right.